Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today we have another great guest. As our ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, it'll be just me sharing ideas, insights, best practices for building those wonderful professional relationships. Occasionally, however, I'll be interviewing subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists, and they help us better understand how to build professional relationships. Today, I want to just kick this off just with a quick little observation. You know, when I was in high school, and we all had our own high school experiences, I went to a small high school, shout out to Houghton High School in Houghton, Michigan. When I went to high school, there were a couple of people who thought like I did. Not that people were wildly different, but people that really resonated with me. And then when I went to college, there were a lot more people who really kind of thought like me. And I don't want to say it was refreshing, but you realize that, you're not really a loner and there's lots of people out there. And then you get in the real world and there's lots of people who kind of operate like you. And I've found that to be very true with respect to what I do now and helping people with their relationships. I don't know anybody in my high school who would have gone down this path. I don't know anybody I went to college with, same thing. Law school, same thing. And then I get out in the working world and I'm in the greater Columbus area, and I'm meeting 4 or 5 people who really resonate, doing something very similar. We can share stories and ideas. And then the COVID lockdown hit. And, there was that moment of panic where it's like, geez, I wonder what's going to happen here. Well, let me tell you what happened. I got on Zoom, I started meeting people, and I realized that there are literally hundreds of people like me all over the world. And one I have on today, I have Janice Porter on. Janice is from Vancouver, British Columbia. She is a relationship marketing specialist. She's a podcast host. The name of her podcast, want to get this right, Relationships Rule. I messed it up yesterday. It's Relationships Rule. And she's a LinkedIn trainer. She's like me. She calls herself curious. I call myself a student of networking. She's curious. She's curious of relationships. And we've had a number of conversations, and I'm glad to get her on the program. Janice, welcome.
Thank you so much. And that was a great story that you told at the beginning too, because it's so true. Being able to click with people and know that they're your people is so enlightening and special. And when you have that happen with people that you weren't even expecting you would meet ever is amazing. So I'm so glad that we met.
Yeah, well, Talal, who introduced us, he's part of our tribe, I guess.
Yes,
and he's over in is he over in the UK? He's in the UK, yes. Yeah. And it was when I talked to him, he's like, "Oh, I know who you need to meet," and so right away he connected us. So, I guess give us the quick backstory. I mean, none of us went off to school thinking we would be doing this.
I know. I went to school always knowing I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to university and became an elementary school teacher, which I did for 14 years. And I love teaching. It's in my blood. I can't help myself. I'm always teaching. But there were some political things. There were some, in a way, I didn't like being in a rut of being in the same classroom every day, the same lunchroom. God forbid you sat in the wrong seat and another teacher would get mad because people are very routine-like in that profession. And so I left. However, that's what started my path towards, what was I going to do next? I became a corporate trainer, which was still teaching, and still kind of a job thing. I just went and did my teaching. Other people went and got me the gigs to go and do. But then that lasted for a while. And then I left there, got squeezed out, so to speak. And then it was, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I don't want a job. And so I was on a path of learning about small business, learning about working for myself. I had no business background really to speak of. So I'm self-taught. And the thing that got me started and going was networking, going to chamber events, going to different networking groups, face-to-face groups back then. And I'm a talker, and I'm a good listener. So I was curious about who these people were. Maybe someone could help me find my next path. And that's what started me on my world of working for myself. And it's, you learn by your mistakes. I also got into the world of network marketing, which is another whole story, but I was able to eventually put the two together and use that banner of relationship marketing as my calling card. However, I'm still teaching. I love teaching. That's what I do.
Well, that's what I wanted to interject when you started talking about teaching, that you always wanted to be a teacher. You still are teaching. You teach people about LinkedIn. You're very involved with Send Out Cards. And all these things are very relationship oriented. You're helping people build relationships on LinkedIn or create relationships to build or create contacts that you can turn into relationships. And then Send Out Cards is just another aspect of it. I just see what you do is all being tied together. The podcast, everything's all tied together.
Took me a while though to get there, to see that umbrella that allowed me to put the two together, and it's working. So I love that.
It's neat, reflecting back on school, being a teacher type. Now, I always tell people when I was in high school, you go down to the guidance counselor, and metaphorically, he had these buckets, right? You like to help people, you can be a fireman or a police officer. You want to be a teacher, here's this bucket. Here, you can get in this bucket. You can be an engineer if you like numbers and math. And so, there were 5 or 6 buckets, maybe more. Okay, there's a nursing bucket. And now it's fascinating. All the different buckets that are out there, and you can invent your own bucket, which is largely what you've done,
Yes. And though I'm going to 2 comments to that. One is that when I was going to school, which, I don't want to tell you how old I am, but it will definitely reflect that, is that for a young woman going through school, you didn't have a lot of choices, because the biggest thing was you went to university to meet your husband and get that white picket fence. Well, the picket fence doesn't always stay standing, but it wasn't about the career so much. And if I had it to do again, I always think, and you're going to laugh at this, I always thought I would go into law, because that was never questioned. That was never a thought back when I was in school. It was nursing. It was teaching. It was being a flight attendant. It was being a secretary. It was never those other things. So that's one thing. And I forget what the other was now, because I took too long on that answer, but that's okay.
Well, my thought is that, and this gets to what we do, networking has really helped us break down those barriers, because when you're going to, for me, a small high school, all is what's in that high school, in the 50 miles to the next high school. All is what is in that high school and what you can see on TV. And now with networking, you start to meet people and you realize, oh my gosh, there are women corporate executives. There are women who have charted a whole different path in the world. And I have a daughter, and I've told her, I've said, look at these things. You can chart your own course. There are a lot of people out there doing very, very well, doing lots of different things, and you don't have to be pigeonholed.
That was the other thing I was going to say, is that also back then people got into a job or a career and they stayed there forever, right? And got the pension at the other end. It doesn't happen that way today. People don't stay in jobs the same way. I mean, you left your career to do something different, but you have that experience, and that can never be taken, and that education that can never be taken away from you, which is
you're right. For our listeners, I was on Janice's podcast yesterday. Again, relationships rule. And what I want to get into, I want to talk. You were interviewing me, so it was a lot of me talking, which according to my kids is really annoying.
No, it's fabulous. I loved it.
Well, thank you. You had mentioned when you go to networking events, you had a strategy, and I really wanted to kind of take a deep dive on that. There are 5 people you try to meet. And I'm a big fan of going to networking events and having a strategy. I have a friend out there, Berta Medina, and she'll tell me, she says, if I'm going to a networking function and there's 5 people, I'll show up with 5 business cards. If I go to a networking event and there's 100 people, I'll show up with 5 business cards. Totally coincidental to what you said. And her whole point is that, you know what, you're really, you know, networking event is really a buffet. You can only eat so much. You can't eat all the food at the buffet. You can only eat so much. And she feels that, you know, meeting 5 people, she only needs 5 business cards, which I thought was very insightful. You took it to a whole nother level. So I want to really kind of hear from you, the 5 people you want to meet, why you want to meet them, and then really kind of how you came to this revelation.
Well, if I may, I'd like to just comment on what your friend said, because my best networking happens when I don't have any business cards.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not about giving out the business cards. It's about getting those cards from the people you actually wanted to meet. Why? Because you're in control. If you leave them with your card, how do you know they're going to call you?
Yeah.
If you get their card, now you have control. So that to me is really important. So I taught networking skills for a while, and I still do it incidentally through, you know, what I'm doing with LinkedIn and so forth, because I see LinkedIn as networking online and having a messaging type strategy around it. But if I'm going to a networking event, I want to know, first of all, what kind of people are going to be there. Like, is it above my pay grade? Is it my kind of people? Is it a certain association of professionals or whatever? So I need to know that. And then secondly, if I can, and this proves, I didn't say this yesterday, but this can prove to be really helpful. And especially if it's like a trade show environment where you're going to walk the room. If you know who's going to be there and have booths and whatever, go on to LinkedIn, introduce yourself ahead of time, tell them you're coming to the event and that you look forward to meeting them. That way you've got a warmer intro when you get there. But the 5 people that I like to meet at, say, a chamber event or a networking event of sorts where there's a speaker or, you know, any kind of thing like that. Number 1, I want to meet the special guest or the speaker, because I want them to, you know, for many different reasons, but mainly because it allows me to then perhaps speak to them, have them on my podcast, or maybe just be able to reach out to them in the future and network with them. Because now if they're the speaker, they're going to be a little bit more important than some of the people that are there, or at least they're billed that way. So I might be able to open up a new circle of influence, right? Number 2, I want to meet the organizer. I want to, they're an important person because they know everyone usually that's coming, or at least they know the majority of them. I want to befriend the registration people, you know, whether it's like at BNI, they have a membership person who greets people at the door. If it's a big event, you know, they do a sign in. I want to make sure I meet that person. And then I want to meet, and that's why those 3 people become important, because I want to meet the 2 people there that are hubs. And you know what I mean by hubs. They're the connectors. Sure. They're the people that know everybody. And so how do I know who those people are? By talking to the registration people, or by talking to the host or hostess of the event, the organizer? They know who their big guns are. And I might even say, can you point me to, or could you introduce me to one of your real connectors? Because I'd really like to meet them. And that's how I would be prepared for that event.
Can you walk through, I guess, when you're having a conversation with each of these, obviously with the hubs, I kind of get it, but how you word it with the organizer and the registration people, as far as, hey, I would like to meet. How do you describe those people? How do you ask to be introduced? Do you ever get pushback on that? I wonder.
Okay, so I wouldn't think so. So first of all, this is, of course, if I'm new to the event, right? Sure. Because once you're part of an organization, then you want to be one of those people. You want to the registration person. You want to be the person that the organizer says, you need to meet Janice. She knows everybody, right? You want to be those people. So if I'm new or I'm going to an event for the first time, I want to meet the organizer to say, hey, I'm really glad to be here. I wanted to introduce myself because I've heard that you do good things. You put on great events. So I'm really happy to be here. Do you have people that come regularly to your events? And if so, would you mind introducing me to one of those people? Because I'd like to get an idea from them of the flavor. You want to flatter the person who's organizing it. You want to ask if they'll introduce you to somebody who knows the ropes, basically, right? And they would be happy to do that because that's going to give you another feeling or another idea of what kind of events they put on from a different person's perspective, right? So they're going to send you to the people they know are their raving fans, right? And when it comes to the registration person, again, I always just want to say, hey, I'm new here. Can you give me an idea of the flow of the event and when's the best time to go around and meet people? Just befriend them, because then they'll remember you next time, or then you'll remember them next time. It's all about, it's all about showing an interest and being curious.
No, I mean, you raised a good point. I think this may sound silly, but there is a learning curve to events. How they flow, how they go. Hey, there's a break in the middle where they're going to be a quick speaker or a presentation, or somebody's pitching something, and people are going to be here till 9 o'clock, and then it becomes a ghost town, or
And that brings up another point, because you do this, I think, with your events. You come on a little bit early and you stay a little bit late. Yep. You want to be one of those people that comes to the event early, or certainly right before it starts, and don't leave until it's over, because that's when the magic can happen. Right after the event. Now, I didn't stay at yours because the time I came to visit, because your timing was such that it was like way past the end of my day. I was done. And there are some days where you don't want to talk to anybody anymore. And so you're not at your best. But it's, to me, really fascinating how people go to events and they have no idea how to network. So they come away from there and say, oh, no, I didn't get any business there. So what's the point of being there?
Yeah.
And I think this is a good place to share this quote that I got this morning.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I get these quotes from Simon Sinek, and some of them, I love his work. And so I just, sometimes I'll use them, and I always, of course, say they're from him. But this quote came in today: the true value of networking doesn't come from how many people we can meet, but rather how many people we can introduce to others. And you and I talked about that a little bit yesterday too. I remember telling you the story about somebody, I think it was Dr. Meisner, who said at the front of the room, how many of you come to a networking event to sell something? And everybody's hand goes up. How many of you come to a networking event to buy something? Nobody's hand goes up, right? So it's not even networking to meet and hand out your cards to everybody. It's networking to meet people that you might then be able to say, hey, you can give value now by saying, I think you might like to meet so-and-so. Would you be open to that? Because I think it might help you going forward.
Yeah, I think I'm not smart enough to do it, but I would love to somehow or another document or track how connections can be, we'll use this term in a COVID world, be infectious. Because hypothetically, you walk into an event, you're there for the first time. You talk to the organizer or the people at the registration desk, and they say, who's the mover and shaker, for lack of a better term. Right. They introduce you to the person, he or she, and hey, this is Janice. She's new to town. She's new to this event, and wanted to introduce you to her. You have this great conversation. All of a sudden, then they introduce you to somebody, because you're not going to be there with them the whole time. That's not, so they introduce you to somebody. And then that somebody introduces you to somebody. So you're talking to the third person, and you're talking to that third person, and you say, do you know the mover and shaker, the first person I talked to? And they're like, no, I don't know that person. All of a sudden, then you're able to make this connection, right?
That's awesome. Yes.
And and it's, it can kind of snowball from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The third person's excited, and they're going to introduce you to somebody. So in short order, I'm not talking about it a 2-hour event, but in a few months, you could be totally infiltrated into that entire organization. And there are always people who are regulars, massive people.
Right. But I think, again, the biggest key when you leave the event is now what?
Yeah.
Follow up. Now what? Yes.
Yeah.
When? How? Right. And I've talked to people that I've been training in those networking skills. And I've said, so when should you follow up? Well, I put the cards on my desk and I set aside time next Thursday to do that. You just met them today. You need to be doing this when it's fresh in their mind,
right.
When you show that you can follow up with people in a timely manner, right? And so I always say within 24 hours, and I used to do this when I went to events and I had stacks of cards, I would go home that night and I would send an email just to say it was nice to meet you. I'll be following up with a call, or, I look forward to booking a time with you. That was before we had, calendar links and all of those things, although that's another story to talk about. But that's the first thing. And then if I got their address, or because I still collect addresses on their business cards. Or if I didn't, I would ask them for it. And then I would follow up with a card, because that's the tangible touch that nobody else does. And then I'd book a time to talk for them, those that I wanted to, right? So there has to be some follow-up in a timely manner. And I think some people don't do it because they don't know what to say. They don't know. They think, I remember back in the day training receptionists on the big switchboards that used to have. And one of the things that they would say to me, I'd sit and I would observe them. And I say, why didn't you answer that call like right away? And this girl once said to me, well, I didn't want them to think that I wasn't busy. And I remember saying to her, that's okay if it's your boyfriend calling, but in a place of business, you want to answer it before the third ring. Okay. Right. You want to show that you're there doing business. So, all those things come into play in networking situations in one way or another. Be timely. Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears here to kind of to wrap this up. I want to talk about you and your business, things you do. I know you do LinkedIn training, how that's done. Certainly talk a little bit about send out cards, and then how people can get in touch with you to get your help, whether it's getting on send out cards or with LinkedIn, or So.
Thank you. That's very kind. So. As I've said before, I structure my business around what I call relationship marketing. And I break that down to 80% relationships and 20% marketing. That's the way I teach. And so if somebody is looking for some training to up-level their LinkedIn profile, I love to work one-on-one with people, and I work with them, not doing it for them, because I'm a teacher. I like to show them how, and I like to create with them. And so there's certain areas in your profile that need to show your personality, and I love to bring that out with people. But that's really just the first bit. I see LinkedIn in 3 buckets. I see your profile, and then if your clients, your prospects, your referral partners are on LinkedIn, then you need to know how to use it effectively. And the other 2 buckets are messaging strategies, how to reach out to the right people, what kind of advanced searches to do, how to respond to inbound requests, and so on. And then the 3rd bucket is content. You need to show that you are the master of what you do, and you need to be visible and show your authority on a regular basis. And so that's another whole piece. And so that's the package in 3 different parts. And all of that information is on my website, along with a free download of 16-point checklist on what to do on your profile. And your audience is welcome to download that. I then, if I'm working with somebody in LinkedIn and I show them, how to build those or start and build those relationships, then I usually introduce my follow-up tool, which is send out cards. Some people I just talk to about send out cards because they're a realtor, a mortgage broker, a sales rep that wants to find a different way to be top of mind. But it just depends. Sometimes I lead with send out, sometimes I lead with LinkedIn, depending on the client. But I do try to add the send out piece to the LinkedIn clients because it gives them another tool to stand out from the crowd. And send out cards is, for those who don't know, and there are still people out there that don't know, it is an online greeting card and gifting system that allows you to send real tangible cards in the mail. You can send one of a kind, one at a time, or you can send one card to many people, or you can do drip campaigns. It's got a myriad of ways that you can use it. And I love teaching people. So I love teaching them how to use this effectively for their businesses. I think that probably, and then my podcast. I never remembered to talk about my podcast, but you've done that in a delightful way. Thank you for that. And I talk to people who think the way I do, like you, that relationships are important. And that's how we can grow our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question, I guess kind of a two-parter. Best way to get a hold of you, and can they find that through your website, which is janiceporter.com? I'll get that in the show notes.
Yes, they can go to janiceporter.com. They can do janice@janiceporter.com and email me and let me know that they heard me speak on your podcast. They can reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. And I am on Facebook, but LinkedIn is sort of primary. And I also offer people an opportunity to send out cards for a test run if they're interested in knowing more about it. So any of that can be found by just emailing me or talking to me through my email or texting me, whatever.
Okay.
I'm not that hard to get hold of, actually.
No, I mean, yeah, you're a relationship person. You're out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I really appreciate your time today on the program.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. I love talking about all of this stuff. And if we can help some people along the way, that's the best.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.